Konnichiwa from Key.io Bite-Sized Bits, where we are giving bite-sized ideas to help inspire and unlock your true potential. And I start off the show like that today. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can see this beautiful, beautiful Japanese garden behind me. There's a koi pond in front of me. I am in Meiji Shrine Temple in Tokyo, Japan, and have been inspired to do a few of these for you today. So today we are talking about how to improve memory. If you listening are like me, you may be absolutely horrible at remembering numbers, at remembering names, at remembering things of all different sorts. And so today I'm going to give you some tactics, some things that you can practice in order to improve your ability to remember those things. One of my year goals last year in 2015 was to get better at these things, and so I went on first few months just this random witch hunt of learning all the different tactics and habits of things that I could implement to help with memory. And put some of those things in place. And I can tell you a year later, I'm still practicing them, but they have been greatly beneficial in remembering these things. So we're going to go over three different things. The first is how to remember numbers. The second, so like strings of digits, phone numbers, addresses, those things, lockers, parking spaces, whatever that is, names. How to remember a good tactic for remembering names. And then lastly, ordering of items or lists of items. Okay, so the first one that we talked about is numbers. And so one of the common, all these tactics, all these things, all these methods are used and kind of talked about by some of the world's best memory champs. And when I say memory champs, these are like the Olympics for memory, where they have to look through a deck of 52 cards and memorize the deck in under 60 seconds and give you back the exact order and all of those types of things. It's where they memorize 1,000 digits, thousands and thousands of digits, 3,000 digits, randomized number, and they'll give you back the exact number. All these incredible memory feats that you can actually learn pretty quickly and get really, really good at. And so that's where a lot of these come in. And if you look in the show notes, I'll give you some of the books that I've read written by some of these memory champs and memory coaches that outline these in greater detail. So the first one that we're talking about is numbers. And numbers can be tricky, but with some practice, it can be very, very easy for you to learn. So the trick with number is you basically need to go from 0 to 100. And so you take a piece of paper and you would write down, or an Excel spreadsheet might work better, and write down 0 to 100. And for each one of the numbers, you would associate that number with either a letter or a individual. So if it's a letter, you can kind of associate that to an individual, and I'll explain that in just a minute. So for instance, if you want the number 1, you could associate with an I. You have one downstroke of a 1, you have one downstroke of an I. The number 3, you could associate with an M. M is like a sideways 3. And so you can go through each one of these letters and associate a specific letter to those numbers. You can also do it with people. So, for instance, what you want to do is, without blinking, if someone said, tell me someone who reminds you of the number 23, your first gut reaction, the thing that comes to you without thinking, should be X, Y, and Z. And if you have someone that you can off the cuff just respond to really, really quickly as an individual that reminds you of that number, then you should write that down. So for instance, number 4 for me would be Brett Favre, big Packers fan. 12 would be Aaron Rodgers, Packers fan. 23, Michael Jordan, and so on and so forth. And so from this, you have all these different letters or individuals, and we're going to use those letters or individuals to help us with our memorization. So from there, you can start combining I like to start in sets of 2, combining in sets of 2, either the individuals or the numbers themselves. So, for instance, if you have a number that is 13, and you want to remember 13, we said 1 was I, and 3 was an M, so I am. Then I would think of I'm, like I'm pointing to myself. You could also take I and M and associate that with an individual. So when you look at 13, the number that we wrote down, you may also have an individual at 13 that maybe there's some sports player, or maybe when you were 13 years old, you went to the circus and saw a clown, whatever that is. I don't know what that is for you. This is all for you. You would then use that clown or that circus or whatever that was for there. So then the next set of numbers, let's say, is 12. And for me, on the number 12 is Aaron Rodgers. So now, for me, we had 1 and 3, which was I am. So that's I'm. And then Aaron Rodgers. So what I could do is, we are visual creatures, and you'll notice that all of these methods take these analytical number type things and turn them into visuals in our brain, because that's what will really allow us to remember things, because we are visual creatures as humans. So now if it's 1, 3 and it's 1, 2, I'm saying I'm Aaron Rodgers, and I could visualize myself wearing his jersey, doing the discount double check thing, passing the football, winning the game, whatever that is, and that will help ingrain those 4 digits in my brain. Then I could go to the next set of digits, and I would string that together. So you could kind of keep going. You have all these individuals, and you can kind of have these people interacting with each other. Now, this kind of coincides with what we're going to talk about, the journey method. And the journey method is the ability to remember the order of things. So we'll jump back to numbers in just a bit when we talk about how to help remember the orders. But let's move on to the journey method. Now, the journey method could be something that you use for remembering a list of groceries. It could be for remembering, the 10 biggest oceans or bodies of water in the world. Whatever lists or sequential things that you wanted to put together. So what you do is you think of a place that is so common to you that you know like the back of your hand. So this could be your childhood home. This could be your workplace if you've been working somewhere for a long period of time. This could be a local restaurant or your high school, or something that like you have a photographic remembrance of that really plays a place. It could also be a route. So maybe like if you typically walked from your house to the local diner, and it was a 1 mile walk, and you passed all these things along the way, you could think of all of those things. So what you're going to do is, in the journey method, is you put yourself at kind of the beginning point of wherever you first remember when you're at that visual moment. And that's kind of like step 1. And you start to build a route of all the different things you see along the way. So for instance, if I'm in my house, one of the first things I'll probably remember is waking up in the morning. So I'll be in my bed. That's kind of like place number 1. Then I go into place number 2, and place number 2 is right out of bed. I almost always went into the bathroom. Had to go to the bathroom, so I went to the bathroom, and I was in the bathroom. From the bathroom, I wash my hands, and then I brush my teeth. That's kind of like point 3. And so what you need to do is first figure out what are those places, and then 2, write down the step-by-step pieces that you go through in that routine, whether it's walking somewhere, whether it's waking up in the morning, whatever that is, and write down all those different things. Now, once you have that list of kind of steps in that quote-unquote journey, now you can start assigning the things that you need to remember. So, for instance, if we wanted to remember back to the example where it was 1, 3, 1, 2, which was 1, 3 is I'm, and then 1, 2 is Aaron Rodgers. I'm Aaron Rodgers. And then we wanted to remember, okay, well, what's the next thing? We could place myself in my bed, and I wake up in the morning. That's kind of step 1. And I could pull the bed sheets open and look down, and holy cow, I'm wearing an Aaron Rodgers jersey, and I'm wearing a football helmet, and what the heck is going on? And that will trigger that, okay, that I'm Aaron Rodgers, the 1, 3, 1, 2, and that's the first set of numbers. Then I get out of bed wearing Aaron Rodgers' jersey and all that stuff, and I walk into the bathroom. I go to the bathroom, and as I'm going to the bathroom, I look out the window, and what do I see? I see Michael Jordan slam dunking, and everyone's screaming and cheering, and I'm like, man, Michael Jordan, like, what is he doing? So that would be that the next set of numbers is 2, 3, since that's the person that I associated with 23. So now we got 1, 3, 1, 2, 2, 3. Right? And then you go to the next step, and you're brushing your teeth, and you look in the mirror, and behind you in the mirror is so-and-so, or maybe it's a some other, I don't know, whatever it is. So you keep going through this method, and you have all these steps, and very, very quickly, it's very easy for you to remember those different individuals in the order, and next thing you know, you have this whole thing. And it sounds like a lot of work, and it is when you first start, and that's why you got to train it, and after a few months, it's going to start clicking, and you'll be able to do this. And these are the people that can go through a full deck of cards in 1 minute and remember the face and the number and everything and the order, and do it in 1 minute because they just have trained this over and over and over again. It's not necessarily that they have this huge special gift. It's just a lot of training and practice. So that's the number. So we went over numbers. We went over the journey method. That's for orders, and of course that overlaps with numbers. Now, the last thing maybe I'll mention on the journey method before I forget is that you want to have multiple journeys. So you can't just have the same. You don't want to have the same place. You may want multiple ones, and you can also kind of coincide the journey that you're using for particular things. So, for instance, anything that is groceries or whatever, I'll use one journey. Anything that is numbers, I'll use a different journey, and you can kind of use what route it is to kind of help you trigger some of those ideas, remembering those ideas as well. So the last thing now is names, which was kind of where I originally got into this. I was horrible at names. I would shake hands, immediately forget, and so I've been diligently practicing on this. Still not good, still a student of this, still practicing away, but here's the method with names. We're going to go through names, then I'm going to give you kind of one overall pro tip on no matter which method you use, how to make sure that you ingrain this even better, and then I'm going to give you an activity, a homework assignment that helps teach you how to remember, in this case, names. So for names, what you want to do is, there's two things we have to remember about names. We have to remember who the person is, and then two, what do they do, or what's the context that I met them in. And those are going to be the two things that will help us remember their particular names. So the nice thing with names is that there's two ways to do it. When someone tells you their name, you want to associate it immediately with someone who is someone who you've met in the past, that without blinking, you remember who this person is. So this could be, childhood best friend. This could be a teacher. This could be a coach. This could be a girlfriend. Whatever that is, someone who, when you say Jessica, immediately, who's the first person you think of named Jessica that's outside of that without blinking? And that's going to be kind of your anchor to anchor that person's name with this other individual. And then you put them in the context of how you met. So there's two ways to do this. If you want to remember the last name, you can break down their last name and use that as kind of the context to set this person in. Or if you want to remember the context of who the real life person is that you're meeting and what they do, you can put them in that context. So I'll give you an example. That was kind of confusing, but let me give you an example. So if I remember Jessica, and I meet a Jessica, and I'm trying to remember her name, and her name is Jessica Farmington. Okay, so Jessica Farmington. And immediately, Jessica, I remember, okay, I went to school with a Jessica, had a crush on her, totally remember her. That's the first person I think of off the top of my head. So I remember that I think of that Jessica that comes top of mind in my memory. Now I think of the last name, which is Farmington, and the first thing that comes to mind when Farmington is I think of someone on the farm plowing, and I think of the Tin Man, right? Because Farmington, Tin Man. So I think of now the Tin Man on a farm plowing the soil, and so I associate those things together. So now I think of the Jessica that I went to school with, that I had a crush on, next to the Tin Man, both of them plowing in the field. And I just visualize that in my brain. Again, taking these things like words that are analytical and turning them into visualizations that we're going to remember. So I think of Jessica from school that I had a crush on, plowing plowing in a field with Tin Man. So now I got Jessica Farmington. And that's going to be something that's going to allow me to really concretely remember that person. Now, if you don't have someone that you went to school with, or if you don't have someone that immediately comes to mind for that name, another thing you can do is, who do they look like? So maybe the names don't match, but they look very similar. So, for instance, I just met a guy traveling here in Tokyo. He was staying at my hostel, named Will. He looked exactly like my friend Joe, who does jiu-jitsu and MMA with me. And so I imagined this guy Will and Joe fighting MMA and battling together, and that was and then I had another friend named Will who also does MMA, and he was kind of coaching them along. And so that kind of association of all of that, the lookalikes plus the names, kind of helped me with that as well. So that's another way that you can kind of do it. Now, if you want to remember the context of who this person is, how you remembered it, maybe you just know their first name, or you really just want to remember their first name, you can use the context to place them in the scene. So, for instance, if I met Jessica Farmington and she was a VP of sales and marketing, and she wanted to grow her revenue. What I could do is I wanted to remember Jessica, so I could flash forward or rewind back to the Jessica I went to school with that I had a crush in, and then I think of what is the first thing that comes to mind when I think of VP of sales and marketing who wants to increase their revenue. Well, I picture this Jessica who I went to school with behind a desk with her feet up on the chair, smoking a cigar, flipping money, using a $100 bill to light the cigar, and you put together this really elaborate scene, and I'll talk about this in a minute. So now that helps your brain trigger the context on which who that person is, and it will remind me later down the road that it's a sales and marketing VP who wants to increase their revenue by 200%. Maybe she's got a big $200 bill, two $100 bills she's lighting her cigar with, and the two $100 bills signifies the 200% that she wants to increase her business. So. Okay, so I know I went through that pretty quickly. We went through the 3 different methods. They are intertwined, right? So you could also use the journey method to remember sequences of names. If you have a bunch of people at a party at a table and you're trying to remember their names in order of the table, where they're sitting, you could do the name exercise we just talked about and visualize, okay, if I'm in my bed just waking up, I wake out of bed, I pull the covers over, and there's Jessica from school. And I was like, oh, she just slept over last night. That's right, we had a crazy party, blah, blah, blah. And so that's the first person who's maybe at the table there. And then I go to the bathroom and I look out the window and I see whoever the next person is, right? So you can kind of combine those two. So we went over numbers, we went over the journey method, and we went over the names. Hopefully, we went through these really quickly. I'm going to put in the show notes kind of the deeper dive books if you want to learn more. And the last thing that I want to mention is for any of these methods, the best thing you can do is exaggeration and including all your senses. We, again, are visual, kind of experiential creatures, and so the more we can incorporate the extreme, the big, the elaborate, that's what we remember. If you think of the things in your life that you remember the most, it's probably these crazy big events, whether good, whether bad, whether whatever, that are kind of like imprinted in your memory, and we want to do the same thing when we're remembering it. So, for instance, in the example of me, I'm Aaron Rodgers, so it's 1312. That was the number I'm trying to remember. Maybe it's like I see Aaron Rodgers on the street, and I run up to him, and I give him a big hug, and all of a sudden, next thing I know, we're grappling on the ground, and I'm beating him up, and I steal his jersey, I put it on, and I'm like, I conquered you, Aaron Rodgers, blah, blah, blah. I'm the new Aaron Rodgers. Like, this big, elaborate scene, and there's thousands of people cheering, and, like, it's loud, and, and all of those things, the more elaborate, the more crazy. That's why a lot of times I don't tell people how I remember their names or how I remember those things, because in my head, it's this, like, crazy story that I made up, and you'd be embarrassed to tell people because it's just so weird and crazy. The weirder, the crazier, the more whatever, the better. So that's kind of number one, is make it extreme. The second thing is involve all your senses. So what do you hear? What do you see? What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you feel? Think about all of those things at each one of the memories. So, for instance, maybe when we're thinking about Jessica Farmington, and I'm thinking of Jessica from school and the Tin Man farming and plowing, maybe I'm thinking, I'm looking down, I'm plowing with them, and I'm covered in dirt, and it's all wet because it's raining, and it smells like cow manure, and I just keep hearing the Tin Man's clink of his, all of those things that starts putting more and more anchors in to that particular memory, which will then help you remember it longer term. So that's kind of my second pro tip, is use senses. Okay, so to wrap this up, we're kind of long on time here. To wrap this up, I'm going to give you a homework assignment, in this case, how to remember names. This is a great drill for you to practice. So get a magazine, random magazine, just get it from a newsstand, whatever, and ideally try and get a magazine in a in an industry or something you're completely not familiar with, or even in another language. If you're traveling, try and get another language. And so what you want to do is you go through the magazine, and it will have people's pictures, and under it will have their faces, whether it's like the editors of the magazine, if it's like a celebrity, if it's, random person in that industry. It has their faces and their names. And go through this exercise that we talked about. And you can not only try and remember that individual person's name, but you can also try and remember the order that they're in. So before you even turn the page, you should know who the next person is. And so go through the magazine once or twice and go through this exercise that we talked about, and then take Post-it notes and take the sticky part and cover up their names. So then the next time you go through the magazine, you have to really go through this. It's kind of like flashcards. You really go through each step, and you see their face, and you have to try and remember that visualization of what we said to trigger the anchor, whatever anchor you built to help trigger the name that you tried to remember, and maybe even the context that they're in if you read some of the article and then try and put them in the context to who they are. So that's a really good game. Once a week, just get a new magazine and go through that with the magazine just once a week, 10 minutes a day even, and before you know it, in a month or two, you'll just be killing it on names and be doing really, really well. Again, I'm still a student on this. I'm still learning. So every day still trying to get better. So anyone who's struggling with memories, if you have any other ideas, tips, whatever, make sure you go and put it in the comments. If you enjoyed this, if you know other people that are struggling with names or numbers, or later down the road someone tells you, hey, I'm trying to get better at names, I'm horrible at names, feel free to share this with your friends and colleagues. And make sure you subscribe either to the podcast we have on iTunes or to the YouTube channel for more bite-sized bits, more goodness that I can bring you to help unlock your true potential. So my name is Luke Summerfield. I'm going to shut up now and go reflect and do some more journaling in this absolutely beautiful garden that we have here. Let me see if I can stand up and give you a picture of the pond. It's kind of hard to see, but there's the pond in the background for those of you watching the YouTube. And I will talk to you later. All right, sayonara.